Good day, everybody. How's it going today? Well, what's our topic for today? Well, it's an interesting one, and it's one that, I meant to talk about for a little bit of time now, and that is dealing with the art community, because the art community is also very important to the fandom. Artists draw and make commissions for it. It's very much a backbone staple of our fandom, with beautiful works of art, of original characters, and even sometimes what's called derivative works. So before we get too much into detail, I have to define these two sort of separate things separately. Words. I'm good at them. Yay. So what are these two different types of art forms? Well, in the furry fandom, we have this very interesting culture where we don't really follow the mainstream all too much, or at least our fandom can exist outside of any works. Like, for instance, if you're a Trekkie, you follow Star Trek. So basically you are dependent upon the mainstream canon to provide you content. Now, those in the fandom usually make what's called derivative works, or they'll make fan fiction with Spock and Kirk and stuff like that, and use other people's original characters and other, companies' original characters to make their own works. Furry fandom doesn't necessarily need to do that. Furry fandom is interested in the anthropomorphization of animals in any context, or at least in any cartoon form or movie form or whatever. Just basically animals with human cognition. So our fandom basically derives from a whole bunch of works. Like, for instance, bronies are somewhat furries, but their main interest would be in My Little Pony, which is an official sort of thing. So they're sort of like the furry fandom, but they're interested in a particular show about anthropomorphic animals. So some bronies might be furries, but not all furries are bronies, right? So, or maybe some bronies are just interested in the show and its storytelling and stuff like that, and the fact that they're anthroponies has nothing to do with their interest. So those bronies might not be furries. That's a whole other freaking can of worms. But in essence, what I'm saying is that furry fandom is not dependent upon derivative works. So I've said that a few times now. I have to define it. So a derivative work basically means like a piece of content that is created by an individual or a fan that basically uses the templates and features and characters of mainstream sort of content. For instance, Sonic the Hedgehog fan fiction, or that use the official characters, or anything really based in the Sonic the Hedgehog world. If they use the characters and the sort of the storylines and stuff like that. My Little Pony fan fiction, fan art of those kinds. Whereas more original content comes from individuals within the fandom that have characters that are either their own original works or are sort of, stories that are created of their own original characters. A lot of good people who are known for this include Rick Griffin, who does the House Pets series, Kyle Gold, who does the sort of Out of Bounds series, or that sports series. I don't know if that's what it's called, but there's like a sort of a world that he created revolving around furries and sports and homosexual relationships, and it deals with that. So those worlds that they build are their own. They're their own creation. They're not derivative works at all. So in the furry fandom, there are individuals who create original worlds with original characters, and there are individuals who utilize characters that are more in popular media in order to create worlds using those popularized characters. So you can have a little bit of both. I think most people, when they're younger, do stem into the fiction or the derivative work more often. Because it's hard, world building is a very, very time-constraining process, and sometimes you just want to write a story and you really, really like these characters, so you use them as sort of like, I would call them like the dolls in your dollhouse, and you would use them and play with them and play with their personalities and try to match their personalities with their original designs and intent, but put them in interesting situations, maybe more gritty than the normal things, maybe more interesting than the original situations, but try to maintain the process of character. And using those templates is actually a very good way to try to learn characterization and things like that while you're still got your feet wet. I've never done something like that before. I didn't make Sonic fan fiction back in the day, right? Yeah, I think I've said that on this channel at least once or twice. But this is where the idea of the fan derivative work versus the fan original work, or fandom original works, come into play. Because recently there was an issue that came up on social media revolving around Midwest Furfest, which is now the largest furry convention in the world, and the verbiage that they had used on their particular thing, on their particular terms of service, particularly for the dealer's den. So here we go. Let me lean in real close so I can read it. So last Sunday, Canadian fur artist Nayli E. brought to Twitter's concerns about Midwest Furfest's rules for the dealer's den, which state, Midwest Furry Fandom Incorporated prohibits the sale or other offer of sale at Midwest Furfest of items that reproduce third parties' intellectual property without the express written permission from the owner. ... It goes on a little bit. Prohibited are included, but not limited to, unlicensed depictions of characters appearing in third-party movies, TV shows, books, sound recordings, still images, sculptures, and any other media. No fan art, no counterfeit goods. Now, these kind of stipulations are not anything really new in these kind of things. They're not really like major things, and that sort of was what Midwest Furfest's response to that particular inquiry was. Midwest Furfest responded, Midwest Furfest has always had a no piracy rule. The specific wording may change from year to year, but the intent and implementation has not. If you have further questions or concerns, please engage with our Dealers Den staff directly at dealers@furfest.org. So, basically trying to take it out of the public view, but in essence, they're trying to figure out what things. So, this is why terms of service can get a little finicky. Verbiage has to be very, very careful. Saying no fan art is a pretty explicit statement. Basically, what constitutes fan art, what constitutes those kind of things, is very tricky. There is a full article in the description below that Equivamp did on the subject matter. And in that article, for Flara.com, in that article there is a link to another article which talks about how very cumbersome fair use law is in regards to derivative works. Anyone in the gamer community can tell you that the gaming community is actually typically pretty laissez-faire when it comes to, fan derivative sort of t-shirts and things that they would fall under parody. A lot of gaming web comics and stuff like that will sometimes use, very strange looking character derivatives of like piranha plants for Mario Brothers or stuff, or the Boo Ghosts or something like that, and put a little quippy line under it, and then they'll sell t-shirts with it. Technically, if Nintendo really, 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 really wanted to crack down on that kind of a thing, they could technically do it. It really comes down to what does, the particular content creator or owner of the original property feel about fan fiction artworks. Now, typically the golden rule is this, or at least it was back when I was writing fan fiction and things like that. But typically the idea was, if you're not making money off of it, you're typically safe. That's a big asterisk there. You're typically safe. 90 times out of 100, if you're writing fan fiction and you're putting out like fanfiction.net or some other website, the main original property owner is not going to bother you because they see it as free promotion and they don't want to stifle free expression. But some people can be very protective, and they have very protective for very particular reasons. One, when I was a fanfiction writer back in the early 2000s, one name was very known about going like full hog on it. And we're going to share this. Anne McCaffrey of the Pern series, or the Dragon Rider series, the Dragon Riders of Pern series, it was a very infamous for her very draconian, I suppose, feelings about fan fiction. It was so bad that I literally remembered this because every time I would submit a new chapter for my Sonic the Hedgehog fan fiction, there's like a disclaimer at the bottom of the site that says, due to things, please do not submit anything from the Dragons of Pern series or anything from, and there was a second one. I couldn't remember what the second one was, but I remember the Dragons of Pern because the Dragons of Pern obviously is more fantasy, furry, sort of the genre that I kind of would stick with me, and it was a story that I had read in high school. Like, one of my English teachers was very into the whole fantasy thing, and I remember reading Dragons of Pern as one of the stories that we read in school. So I was like, really? So looking more into it, you found that, she was like, no, I don't want you messing with my characters. And literally people who had made fan RP sites, like that was a big thing back then too, was like we had message boards, forums basically, which forums have been kind of going the way of the dodo recently, but there are still sites that have forums such as So Furry and Fur Affinities. Forums have kind of, gone wonky. But, before social media, forums were a big, sort of mid-web, early Web 2.0 of dealing with social things. Some of the early furry ones I went to were LiveJournal ones or LiveJournal forums and other such fan forums. Yahoo groups were a big one. They were sort of forum, sort of group sort of things. So back then it was interesting to read about that. I had no interest in making fan fiction for Pern, but obviously a lot of people who were into that sort of thing were very upset that they couldn't express their wish to, expose the character, delve deep into those characters of the world. These days, if you go to fanfiction.net today, Dragons of Pern the Dragon Riders of Pern is actually a fanfiction group that you could see in the books section of the site. And what I came to find out is that Anne McCaffrey had died in 2011. But before she died in 2010, she let out her and I think her agent was like her brother or something, Todd, I believe, sort of let out this sort of statement that, it's fine to do fan derivative works, just don't take money for it, don't make it erotic, don't, et cetera, et cetera. The biggest concerns I guess she had was that she really wanted to see her stories made into a movie, or something like that, or she really wanted to see her property, untainted so that other people could use it in order to do things with it outside of just the novel thing. So she was worried about it being tainted by internet people, and ironically I don't think that helped her in that regard, in essence, because Harry Potter, if you go to the book section of fanfiction.net, of course, Harry Potter is the most written genre or most written world used in the fan fiction world, with Twilight coming in second. Of course. So, that I don't think corresponding with it seems like if you allow people to make fan fiction on it, and like all these fan fiction, like if you look at the highest written things in the book section, they're ones made out of movies. I don't, obviously that whole chicken and the egg thing comes into play. It's like, well, if Dragons of Pern was made into a movie, maybe it would go up in an amount of fan fiction rating. Anyways, we're getting way off topic here. Anyways, fan fiction nerds here. Derivative works. So the issue with derivative works is that, it very much is a case-by-case basis. And most times when you're dealing with selling things, that's when things can get a little heated. When you're selling like T-shirts with Pikachu on it or whatever, and it's not really your original design. It was just something you bought from a shirt shop en masse, and you're selling it like as if you were Nintendo, and Nintendo might go, you're selling a bunch of Pikachu shirts, and you didn't really do much with it. It's not really an original design of any case. That's not good. That's where the whole no piracy and no things come into play. It really, and as fandom grows, and as our furry fandom grows, these kind of questions are going to come up more and more frequently, unfortunately. It is something that we have to deal with at some point or another, especially as our fandom grows into a more public view. It was something in the back of my mind for a few years now, quite a bit now. It's not something I wanted to talk about directly on a video, because it's like, talking about it sometimes, puts oxygen into the fire, and it's like, I would love to see it so that we don't draw attention to ourselves from, people who want to, from original creators or people or large corporations who want to come down on high and look and see like, oh, there's a Pikachu there, or oh, there's a Yoshi, or there's a Sonic the Hedgehog. We're gonna come down on these fans. You kind of get worried about that, or Disney or something like that, or Robin Hood and all that stuff, and you kind of worry about that kind of thing, because it would be a big sort of, coming of sort of a thing. But now sort of MFF has brought this sort of thought into the forefront, so now it's a good time to talk about it. Since I can't lend any more oxygen to it, the oxygen's already in there. We might as well talk about it. This is fine, folks. This is fine. But some have argued that, of course, with like there's really two main camps in the debate over fan art and stuff like that. Obviously, if you're making a lot of money off of it, you should really have an original design, and you should really, really be able to argue that it's parody. Obviously, that's a thing that's done by a case-by-case basis, and that's tough to do in a court of law. The safest bet, obviously, is having your own original works, your own original stories to sell at your dealer's den table, and make sure that their works don't use any derivative characters from any other series and things like that. There are people in two camps. It's like, well, fandom is the foundation of our fandom. We like seeing mainstream characters, and we would love to see mainstream characters and have like the whole thing in there. One of the biggest arguments in the case of this is like, what if I wanted to go and have somebody draw my Persona character with their Pokemon team or something like that? It makes like, I'll have my Marowak and my Noivern and all this stuff, and I want to just have my Roo character with these Pokemon. And under a derivative, no making money off of derivative works rule, that sort of fan umbrage, I'd have an Umbreon there. See? Aha! See, now, I couldn't quite get that at the dealer's den in such a rule where it's like, well, you can't have fan works. So like, oh, well, you can't. And that's going to be kind of one of the hardest things, is if it does become more, stringent, that you can't draw, third-party characters that don't belong to you, even in a fan sort of sense. A person who might not be in the know walks up at the dealer's den and talks to the artist about it, and the artist's like, I'm sorry, man, but according to the rules here, and here's the rule, I know I used to draw a lot of Pokemon work in the past, and a lot of people enjoyed it, but while I'm sitting at this dealer's den table, I cannot sell you this work. And some people might get confused by that. I think a lot of furries are understanding And so, like, that won't be too much, but it can kind of get annoying if that happens over and over again. So, if people have a rule and they make the rule and they understand the rule, I think it's better, which is why it's a good thing that this person brought this to light. Because knowing this is better than not knowing it and being surprised by it at the door. Which is why news is important. Click the subscribe button. Anyways, the other side of it, and I think Ruki, R-U-K-I, they're known for their Red Lantern series, I believe. They're known for, like, pretty realistic-looking anthro-animals of their own original design. People like him are more, like, on the side of, well, I'm glad that they're doing this, because, like, there are some individuals in the furry fandom who really don't like being around other people who are more derivative, or kitsch, as they might call it in the art world. But then again, many people in the art world might call anything that's furry kitsch. All right, kitsch is a sort of a slang term deriving a sort of popularized art style that a lot of people would buy. Like a flamingo in the art is kitsch, or you know, a soda bottle, you know, is kind of, a glass soda bottle is kind of kitsch. Like it's something that it's seen in the art world as junk, but a lot of people like buying it, so it's sort of popular. So it's sort of popularized junk, or popular. Yeah, it's a crass term. I learned it from my sibling when she went to art school, and she drew a thing called "Kitsch My Ass" as her final project, because she enjoys, like, anime style, and, you know, someone said, well, her anime style was kitsch, and so she made her final product around that. But anyway, I always found that one humorous. Anyways, there was, so that, what were we talking about? So yeah, some people are saying, well, this is a chance for the fandom to grow if we do get rid of derivative works being sold at the dealer's den, or any sort of derivative parody works. If we are more stringent upon people bringing their own original ideas and content that belong to themselves, we will be a stronger fandom for it. Because then we don't have to worry about those guys from on high looking over our shoulder going, hey, are you drawing that Pikachu again? I'm like, no, I'm not drawing a Pikachu. I'm drawing an energy mouse that, like, just so happens, and they're pink. Okay, they're pink, and they don't have cheeks. They have sort of like they have really radicalized whiskers. Yeah. See, this is an energy mouse. This is not Pikachu. Get off my case. Anyways, yeah. So like I think that's the thing too. Like, if somebody is good at drawing styles like a Sonic the Hedgehog style, they could draw your OC. You could have your OC. That's sort of, it's somewhat derivative work, but it's not really derivative. Sega has a very good history of being very laissez-faire with original fan characters. Do not steal. Even so much so that they made an entire game where the premise was sort of that. So on the final steps on this sort of thing is that it's sort of interesting when we're talking about intra-fandom issues too, because I talked a lot about derivative works from third parties and outside the fandom versus, you know, original works within the fandom. But there's a very interesting issue with because as the furry fandom grows, our original works can technically become third-party works if you're talking about somebody drawing fan fiction or fan art of an original creation from a furry. Now it's getting really weird, right? So this came up very, very recently, and it was just before I started recording this, something came up on my timeline, like, ooh, that's perfect. We gotta talk about this. So Rick Griffin, who created House Pets and things like that, had a tweet that they did. Ignore the unfollow thing. I must have had my mouse over the follow button accidentally when I took that screenshot. Don't unfollow Rick Griffin. Follow Rick Griffin. He's a cool guy who makes a lot of cool stuff. And he's a kangaroo, of course. I follow him. Why not? Anyways, why does this happen? I keep getting over anxious requests from people wanting to do fan art, even if they have no interest in posting it. This has happened more than twice. Where does this anxiety come from? Do they think someone will snitch to the copyright police? So, basically, Rick Griffin here, who's the maker of House Pets, apparently is getting individuals contacting him about fan art that they want to do of either a House Pets character or one of his many characters on many of his storylines. There's the A&H Club and all those other things. And they sound like it's like they have no intention of posting it or doing that things. And they contact him about it. And he says that they sound very anxious when they're doing it. Reading through the responses of that thread, it sounds like there are some furries out there who go a little bit of, what was her name again? Anne McCaffrey. Go a little bit of an Anne McCaffrey on their arse, alright? They go a little bit like, how dare you draw my original characters, even if you don't put it on their thing. Come up with your own thing. My characters do not steal. Original characters do not steal. So, like Anne McCaffrey, some people in the furry fandom, apparently, with their original content, have a little bit of a complex of trying to make sure that other people don't use their works and create derivative works from their works. Which is interesting, because now it's gone full circle. So, technically, the rule in which, Midwest Furfest has put forth said no fan art, that could very well go for, like, intra-fandom things, too. Like, don't make fan works of Rick Griffin's content and sell it at the dealer's den. Particularly if you don't ask, because that's a really jerk move. I mean, at least if you want to make, like, t-shirts and you have, like, a t-shirt company and you want to do, like, hey, I want to make some, like, house pet t-shirts, ask the original creator and give them a cut or work out some contract or something. Because it's rude. Otherwise, it's rude. Don't stiff the ruse, man. So, yeah, I mean, that's a very much an issue, is that there are derivative works, and I've seen other evidences of this happening in the fandom where something becomes really popular in the fandom and then some other individual makes a very derivative sort of version of that and tries to sell it sort of as their own. But you could tell where they got their inspirations from. I believe one example was, I believe I saw a derivative work of the Roommates, which is ironically it's sort of its own derivative work, based off of some Nintendo characters, and somebody had made some sort of a inspired work that similarly did that, and they were selling it at the I think it was Anthro's deal down. I don't know, it's weird, but that can happen sometimes in the furry fandom too. And so these kind of conflicts of ownership of ideas and properties is going to be something that's going to be with us for quite some time. And it's going to be something that there's no be-all, end-all of what rules or what things are going to happen with it. Really, the only time a stink's going to happen is if someone makes a stink about it. Usually it's going to be the original property owners. So just be aware of it. And if you're going to go into being a dealer at the dealer's den, try to have something original to bring to the table. Try to come up with something original. Obviously, in argument's sake, all work can be considered derivative. If you go back to the earliest times of storytelling, the storytelling tropes that we use that have been passed on from generation to generation have been utilized for a very long period of time. And literally, I mean, one of my English teachers once said, everything is a derivative work of Homer's The Odyssey, or Homer's works. Like, if you look at any storytelling elements in writing or in anything like that, you're going to find some very, some elements that were, passed on from generation to generation that go back to, like, the old stories from Homer back in Greece, I believe it was, or like some like even Shakespeare took some elements from that. People take elements from things and create their own works based off of new ideas, bring new ideas to old sort of styles and sort of like that, and they merge them and they create their own works. So in essence, all work is sort of derivative, but I've always said it like this. You start off with sort of fan work. You start off with really blatantly derivative work, such as Sonic the Hedgehog fan fiction or My Little Pony fan fiction, to get used to character archetypes and expectations and how to play with those. As you start getting more and more used to that, you can kind of create your own characters that are sort of based on those tropes and expectations, but adding your own little spin to it. Like, if you really like Gadget from Rescue Rangers, but you don't make like a campy sort of detective story, but have like you can have a mouse character who's very self-sufficient and she's very good with mechanics, but be in a completely different setting, have a completely different hairstyle. She's not blonde. Make it something that maybe she's not so like shy and upcoming. Maybe she's a little more forward and aggressive. Change and tweak with the archetypes a bit. Come up with your own very thing, and then you won't have to worry too much about stepping on people's toes, and you can truly be independent. And I think that's the thing that a lot of the Rookie was trying to say, is that maybe like if the fandom tries to move away from utilizing too much of the fan roots, but not abandoning them fully until we're forced to. Obviously, we shouldn't abandon the things that we enjoy and utilizing and making references to them as long as we're not forced to. But at the same time, we should be prepared, to make our own way and to create our own content and to make it so that people can enjoy the furry fandom, even if the big hounds come down on us from the Disneys or the Nintendos of the world. And I think we'll be all right. So I'm going to get the hop out of here. Thank you very much for watching this long rambling thing about arts and and copyright sort of things. I'm not a lawyer, so for sure, don't take anything with this illegal grain of salt. Always try to assess your own situation and understand that if you need help understanding what is and isn't things, contact the dealer's den if you believe that your work might be a little too derivative or not. As a dealer, you should contact the dealer's den as they suggest in order to figure out what works they'll consider or what works that you do if you believe that it might fall within the bounds. Follow their advice on contacting them if you believe that some of your works might fall within that gray or forbidden area when it comes to making derivative works. Anyways, I'm going to get the hop out of here. Kick that like, kick the subscribe button, kick a comment in the comment section. You ever made fan fiction back in the day? I did. I'm guilty. I'm guilty as charged. I didn't make any money off of it though, and I haven't done it lately. So I've stopped doing it. I got off of it, all right? Don't come after me, Sega. Don't leave me alone, Sega. Actually, it's more like Archie things, and they're gone at this point. So, and Ben Hurst is dead. So, no, I'm not hurting anybody now. Anyways, I'm going to get the hop out of here. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next week, Sunday at 9 p.m. for the next Rooview. Thank you very much for watching, as always. Have a good one.